Hello, people. Welcome to the community of the Growth Mindset podcast. Guys, if you are a first time listener, don't forget to subscribe on whichever platform you're listening from so that you don't miss on more interesting episodes coming up in following weeks. And for our daily listeners, here we are again with a new episode where we will interview another interesting personality from a unique industry and understand how they were able to accomplish this great level of success. Remember, this is a podcast where we learn easy, practical methods and tips that we can implement in our daily lives from the very best and the most successful people known today. Because as we all know, success leaves clues. And we, the people having the growth mindset, will use these clues to create a better, more fulfilling, and a successful life. So, let the growth begin. So, Kamna, first thing first, thank you so much for joining us on the Growth Mindset podcast. It is a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's a real pleasure to be on your program. Looking forward to interacting with you and looking at the topic together today.
Yeah. So, Kamna, for people basically who don't know you, I'll just give a quick introduction about yourself. Guys, Kamna is the head of mental health department at Fortis Healthcare in Gurgaon. She's also a TedX speaker, an author, a writer, and one of very influential people when it comes to mental health personalities out here in India. So, Kamna, before we dive into the conversation, would you like to give like a quick, introduction about yourself? Where you're from? What's your background like?
Right. Very briefly, I am a clinical psychologist, like you were introducing me, and I've been working in this field for around about 14 years or so now. I started way back when I was in my master's, and I worked my way through different departments, different programs. I've been learning along the way, and it's been a very, very interesting journey. I had started out as an intern with the department that I currently head, actually, which is something that perhaps a lot of people would not also be aware of. That was long ago during my master's program towards the end of the first year. And over the period of time, I've been involved with them. I started working with them. I was a counseling psychologist. Then I went for my further studies, did my MPhil, and thereafter I joined as a clinical psychologist, grew through the program. We used to initially work with Max Healthcare, and then we moved to Fortis Healthcare as a team of about I think we were about 19 people at that time. And currently we have grown as a team. We're about 75 people. We work out of 9 cities in India. And we run a very robust program. We work with a lot of young people, and when I say young, I really mean young because I feel really old when I work with a lot of people. It's interesting to do the kind of work that we do, because what we have tried to do is not just focus on the clinical aspect, which of course is very, very important, and we'll keep on talking about that as we are taking our conversation forward. But for us, one of the primary areas is to create a lot of awareness, sensitize populations, help people understand the relevance and the importance of mental health, and try and ensure that mental health does become a priority and a talking point for everyone. And in order to do that, for us, one of the biggest areas has been to work with a lot of schools, to collaborate with corporate organizations, to work with NGOs, try to do as much work as we can in supporting government agencies, whatever we can do in terms of writing, in terms of media-based activities, whether it's print media, visual media, social media. So we've been trying to infuse our energy into all of these platforms, and for me, I think that has been one of the most wonderful aspects of the work that I do. And a lot of times people ask that, okay, how do you maintain your mental health, and how do you keep going through the day, because you hear so many different difficult situations, challenging experiences that people are going through. And this is what I tell them, that it is these small victories, small moments that we end up having on a daily basis, where we see changes, where we see that we're making an impact, that really drive us. So that's, in a nutshell, a little bit about us. Of course, more details are available over the web about everything that we do, from running helplines and writing books and all of that. So yes, that's maybe a little bit about me as the professional that I am.
Sure. And what exactly got you inspired to get into clinical psychology?
So when I was a young child, I always used to talk about being a cardiac surgeon, and the inspiration for that used to come from my grandmother, who actually had by that age two cardiac incidents. And so for me, that used to be a very big thing, that I want to do something in that space. And I think when I was growing up, as I moved further and I came into my senior grades, I was also a very voracious reader. That was a habit inculcated by my family, by my parents. And I started reading a lot of Sidney Sheldon books. That was in about, I think, the 7th or the 8th grade. And I got introduced to the world of mental health thanks to a Sidney Sheldon book, where I for the first time came across, something which was labeled as a psychiatrist, and what psychology is about. And during our times, this is in the 90s, that time, the late 90s, mid 90s, psychology, mental health was not talked about. We did not even have a course in psychology in our school. We currently do. My school does have it now. But at that time, when I was pursuing my 11th and 12th grade, it wasn't there as a subject. And so my interest started coming in from there, through my readings and interactions. And then I was introduced by a very dear family friend to the entire subject when I was looking at applying for colleges in my graduation. And they suggested that, you've always had an interest in the healthcare sector. You've always wanted to align yourself there. Why don't you explore this subject? And I was like, yes, I've read about it. I don't know much about it. So why not go for this? So it was for chance that I entered the field at that stage. But when I did, and the study started, the first year went by, and then I entered the second year, and you started getting into the specializations. I just knew that I had found my passion, my area, something that was just so engaging and enchanting. And to this day, I'm completely hooked. And I think that I will stay like that, hopefully for the rest of my life,
Awesome.
because every day is a different day. Even if you're speaking with the same client every week, when you're doing sessions, it's still different. And there's so much to learn. There is no stopping the learning process. And I think which is fabulous with the kind of work that we do, because there's so many updates, so many changes, so much research that keeps on happening, which really, really is very, very engaging.
True. And, obviously there's a lot of stigma around mental health, right? And most people are even afraid to visit a doctor when it comes to consultation, right? So what is your advice to those people first?
Mental health needs to be looked at just the way you would look at a physical health related condition. A mental health, which would also mean that it is also something which is treatable. When we do not treat a physical health illness for too long, yes, it would get severe, and yes, it would become debilitating, and it would affect other parts of your body. And it's the same with mental health. If you let it if you let it be, and you do not attack the problem as soon as you're seeing that there is some change which is happening and which is unexplainable, it is causing an impact on your functioning. Your daily routines are getting affected, your social relationships are getting affected, you're feeling either stressed, your moods are not fine, your behavior is changing substantially. Or if you're seeing those things, then it's very important to seek help, because the sooner you seek help, the best results would happen then. And the fact is that we have so much research which is going into this field, both in terms of psychiatric research, which is for the medical intervention, as well as psychological research. And there are such effective and efficacious treatments which are available, that if you were to utilize the right kind of support and reach out to experts, it would certainly be very, very valuable. So I think that's one part of it. I think the second aspect is that somewhere we as a society need to make a very conscious effort to try and not utilize terms very frivolously. So for instance, typically when you'll have a conversation with a friend, it's very easy to say that, अच्छा यार मेरे को बहुत depression feel हो रहा है. But we tend to lose the understanding and the conceptualization of what depression really is. It's an illness, right?
True.
At the end of the day, there are certain criteria you need to meet. It needs to be there for a certain duration of time for you to meet that criteria. But when you start using terminologies too frivolously, I think somewhere it loses its essence also. So whereas, yes, it was very encouraging when people started talking about mental health, but it can't be used too loosely. We need to still maintain that boundary around it to say that yes, it's an illness. It needs to be looked at like that, so that people are encouraged to take treatment for it also. And yet we need to remember that we do not discriminate. We do not stereotype people who have mental health related problems. It's a reality that people who have mental health related issues, not all are violent, right? Not all of them are of
True.
a weak character or of a weak moral temperament. It's not that they have done something wrong, which is why they're having this illness. And the reality is that today I may be the expert, but tomorrow even I could have an illness, just the way I could get any other physical health related ailment also.
Yep.
And that is one thing that these are some of the things that we do need to keep in our mind to be able to beat the stigma around mental health related problems.
Correct. And you said it a very important point, right? By telling first we need to identify what exactly are the differences between, let's say, stressed, overstressed, anxiety, and then depression. Because nowadays we are using it very often, saying, just because you were, like, let's say for 2 minutes you felt really, low, and then you say, oh man, I feel depressed. And then that puts you, and again, what we say to ourselves over and over again, it kind of turns into a reality. I think understanding the difference also as to what exactly is depression, what exactly is anxiety, would help all of us to understand what these things are, and not just blabber things out just because you feel like telling it, right? Now, we were talking about research, right? So I just want to go back to that. Do you have any specific research data on top of your mind which shows what is the current status of the population in India and how we are prone to mental health illnesses?
So see, if you look at data and statistics, the last mental health survey that was done by the government was in 2015-16. That was a national mental health survey which was done, and that time the statistics revealed that the prevalence rates are roughly around 13.7% of the population. Right. Prior to that, I think in 2011 or so, the WHO had done some research, and they had pegged the numbers at about, I think, 11.2%, roughly somewhere around there. So you're looking at anywhere between 12 to 14 people amongst 100 who are likely to have a mental health related illness at any given point in time, within our country, within India specifically. That's a very large number, because we're also a very, very large population.
True.
Right? And if you look at it in terms of treatment, if you look at it in terms of availability of experts, now that's where the problem is, because we don't have as many experts. We have a dearth of experts within our country, unfortunately, and the difference in numbers is actually quite a lot. And the second aspect is that we also have a lot of disproportionate distribution of mental health experts, which would basically mean that if I am staying in, say, Delhi, which is where I am, you have a large number of experts available here. Right, the market is saturated with people who are available. So you've got people who are counselors, which is meant people who've done their masters in psychology and do basic counseling services. You've got a lot of clinical psychologists who would have done their MPhil and they're providing specialized therapeutic services. You've got a lot of psychiatrists who've done their MBBS, MD, specialized in psychiatry and provide the medication piece. You've got a lot of psychoanalysts. You've got remediation experts, you've got occupational therapists, you've got special educators, you've got art-based therapists. You'll find everything.
Yeah.
But as soon as you go from a Delhi or a Gurgaon to, say, you're going towards the outskirts, and you're moving now towards, say, you're on the Jaipur highway, right?
Yeah.
And you're moving from there and you're going towards, say, a Bhiwadi, and you cross all of those smaller areas, you will suddenly see that there is a dearth, right? And the numbers start falling. And that's one of our biggest challenges, that we don't have enough experts who are in the peripheral areas. Peripheral, just for not saying that those areas otherwise are peripheral, but in terms of the geography right now, if you look at it, city perspective, the number of experts tends to dwindle down. So which would mean that this number that I was stating about how many psychiatrists and psychologists are available, now this would be even worse in those areas.
True.
So that is also an additional challenge that we face. Now, what that does is, one, people are not able to necessarily find an expert to reach out to. Two, what it also does is that the number of people who need help a lot of times don't even realize that they need help, because there is no one to also psychoeducate them or guide them that there is a problem. And that becomes another impediment which is there in front of us. And if you again go back to the survey that I was talking about, which is the National Mental Health Survey, it was saying that close to about 90% of the population that requires mental health services is actually not getting to the experts. And mind you, even if we're catering to about 10% of the population, most people in mental health are actually seeing a lot of people. So it's a very paradoxical situation, right?
Yeah.
You know, a lot more people need to be seen, but you also know that the experts that you have cannot perhaps see too many more, right? So what do you do? So we're in a very tricky space, so to speak, in the mental health framework.
So how can people realize in the first place that they are having a mental illness? What are some signs to look out for?
I would say that, so what do you do if you have a physical health related problem, right? You start noticing that there is something which is changing for you in your body's functioning. So if you are, suddenly you find that, you know, your stomach is staying more upset, right? Or you're getting a lot of heartburn. What do? You go to your general physician, you go and talk to them and you tell them these are the symptoms that I've been seeing. Now, when you're looking at mental health, what do we mean constitutes mental health? We should try and understand that, right? And when we're saying mental health, how do you think? How do you feel? How are you behaving? Now, if you start seeing that there are very substantive changes which are happening in these three areas, so in your thinking, say, for instance, you're feeling that there are too many thoughts happening, or the kind of thoughts that are happening are not necessarily conforming to others around you. There seem to be a lot of errors in that thought process. Or, for instance, the thought process has become very negative, or there are too many anxious thoughts running in your head, or the thoughts are becoming repetitive. So that could happen in your thought level. If you're looking at it in terms of feelings, now in my feeling state, I could be feeling, say, a lot sad. I may be feeling a lot more angry. I may be getting a lot more irritable. I may be feeling a lot of, say, guilt, excessive guilt. Or I may be feeling a lot of disappointment, a lot of dejection. And I'm not saying that this lasts only, like I feel it for a bit and then it goes away. These are feeling states or thought patterns which are there for extended periods of time and which we're not being able to change. In my behavior, what could I see as a difference? Am I being more snappy towards people? Have I lost my productivity? Do I find it difficult to concentrate as compared to, say, a few weeks ago or a few months ago? Am I now struggling to maintain my daily chores in my house? So if I was needed to, take care of the cooking within the house and I'm just struggling to do that, am I struggling to get myself out of bed? So behaviorally, are all of those changes happening? Am I getting very aggressive, or am I just becoming very sluggish? So these could be indicators for you to say that something may be going on. Now, how do you determine that this something is substantial? For that, you need to look at how long is it going on for? Because each of us does have these phases, right? When you may want to slow down a little, or when you may be struggling a little because you've had a bad experience. Also, you need to look at, have you experienced some sort of a loss? Have you had some sort of a bad traumatic experience? And maybe that's why you're experiencing what you're experiencing. Maybe you fail in a subject and thereafter you've been feeling a little more anxious. But you see that while you may have felt that for a few days or for a few hours, it starts getting better subsequently.
True.
When it's mental health related illness, it's not going to get better on its own. It will typically keep on deepening, and your functionality in your social, occupational, academic areas, in your home related chores would keep on becoming lower and lower. And that's when it's a problem. And that's when you need to speak to someone. You could speak to your general physician. Most GPs, most doctors do know mental health. They do understand it. They would be able to help you figure out whether you do need to take an expert opinion. If you do need that, then they can guide you to the right expert that they are aware of. So could be a psychiatrist, could be a psychologist. If you don't know whether you should be seeing a psychiatrist or a psychologist, go to any one of them.
Okay.
Just reach.
So what's the
expert.
difference between a psychiatrist and a psychologist?
The essential difference is in how do we treat mental health related problems. So for a psychiatrist, they're looking at the biological basis of the mental health related issues that an individual may be experiencing. So what they work on is the neurotransmitters, which are basically chemicals in your brain which regulate how you think, feel, and behave. And
Correct.
what happens in mental health related problems is that imbalances in these neurotransmitter levels, putting it in a very, very layman kind of a way,
Yeah.
so some sort of imbalances in them tend to result in these changes in our thinking, feeling, and behaviors. And when we start rectifying it with the medical intervention, just the way you would for, say, a thyroid problem, or or for, say, your insulin levels if you have diabetes. Similarly, we give certain medications which take care of the neurotransmitter levels, and then that starts restoring your normal functionality. And so that's what the psychiatrists do. They look after the medical part. And what the psychologists do is they look after not medical part of the illness, because when you are experiencing a lot of these changes, there are some things that you also need to do on your own. So you have to find ways to start modulating your thinking. You have to start finding ways to cope better, to adapt to changes. You need to start looking at what are the mechanisms that you regularly employ to take care of yourself. What is happening in your relationships? Are there certain patterns which are becoming maladaptive? How do you fix those? So that all you do with your therapist. So they work on the same problem, but they're attacking it from different sides,
different angles.
And so a lot of times you see people would be visiting both psychiatrists and psychologists, for the experiences that they're having, and the two in tandem can give you very good effects.
Makes sense. Now, if I've got you right, you said 3 reasons to understand if somebody is, affected or is a suspect of mental health. Thoughts, making sure of your thoughts, feelings, what you're feeling like, and then behavior, right? What's your behavior like? Now, how long should we track this feeling for? For example, let's say all 3 are in place and we are feeling this, okay, this is what is happening, our mood is not well. But how long does it take? It could be 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Do you have any specific timeline? Like if this continues for a span of time, that is when we are a suspect and we should visit a psychiatrist or a psychologist.
So typically, each illness has its own duration framework. That makes it tricky. But I would say roughly if you're seeing something going on for about a week to 10 days and it's intensifying, or the frequency of those experiences is increasing, it's causing you a lot of distress, it's disrupting your functionality, it's better to talk to someone and figure out if it really is a mental health issue or not. And if it is, then they will help you figure out what would be the best way of treating a problem.
Makes sense. Now, going back to our previous topics that we were talking about, as to you visit or you consult a lot of young people, right? So is there any research or any data available that shows us which are the people or the age group which is more suspect or more prone to mental health illnesses? Do you have any data like that?
So not really. I wouldn't be able to say that, okay, this is the population which absolutely needs to be focused on. So how mental health illnesses work is that there are peak age groups for different illnesses also, right? So mental health illnesses are slightly more complex. They also vary a lot of times on the basis of gender. Certain illnesses are seen more in women, certain illnesses more in males. So it's going to be very hard to say that this is the vulnerable population. I would say that vulnerability needs to be understood more in the context of environmental and psychological factors, because the biology you can't do much about. So what you're born with in terms of your genetic makeup or in terms of the biological predisposition is something that you're born with. It's nothing that you can do anything about, right? But what is variable is going to be the psychological makeup that you have. So, which means the kind of approach that you have towards situations, the kind of ways in which you cope with stressors, with difficult situations. What are the kind of adaptive mechanisms that you tend to employ? What is the kind of social support system that you have erected for your own self? What are the kind of skills that you have for, say, problem solving, decision making? All of those would form a very big part. At the same time, are you living in an area, or are you belonging to a region which is experiencing, say, either a lot of conflict or either a lot of, say, natural disasters? That could make you more predisposed to having mental health related issues. Or are you someone who's working in a job space which is a very stressful, very, very high stress environment? There are a lot of pressures to meet certain targets, certain goals, and your entire performance is contingent upon that, or your entire appraisal is contingent upon that. So that could become a very high pressure situation where your biological vulnerability can get triggered. And I think what becomes very important is for individuals to keep on determining what is it that they can do to manage their levels of stress in a better manner for themselves. And at the same time, how do they create the right kind of support systems around them so that in case they are feeling stuck with the situation or with the problem, they can reach out to people to discuss what's going on. Because sometimes you just get a mind block, right? You get into this tunnel vision sort of a space where your head is not coming up with other solutions. So you may need inputs from other people to help you do that and work through it and look at it from different vantage points. It would also help to often take some sort of a reflective approach where one can look at what are the patterns that I display. What is my typical way of working through the different stressful situations that I have gone through? So if my approach is to try and run away from a problematic situation, it doesn't mean that the situation goes, but I keep feeling stressed. So how is it that I find a way to engage with the problem without getting too overwhelmed, yet finding ways to solve it? Or if it's a problem which I can't solve, then how do I make sure that I don't get overwhelmed by it? And I am able to maintain my state of balance while reminding myself that there are some things which I can't control. And so I need to only focus on what I can control. So for instance, if you look at this lockdown, right, or the entire pandemic situation, what is it that's in my control? In my control is my safety. So I can ensure that I do the social distancing piece. I can ensure that I wear the mask. I can ensure that I don't step out unnecessarily to meet people or to purchase things if I don't absolutely need to. So you focus on what you can control. And if there are things that you can't, then you learn to let them be. And you keep on reminding yourself that as and when situations evolve, one would keep addressing them and handling them in the best way that one can. So developing that kind of a belief system becomes very important. And it becomes important that you keep on identifying what are the assumptions in your thought process, what are the beliefs that are driving you, are there any maladaptive thought processes, do you end up thinking in blacks and whites, do you end up having a tunnel vision, you look at only one thing, do you end up catastrophizing things? So then you keep working on those things, and that would help you maintain your mental health.
Makes sense. Now, what about recent events? Let's talk about at today what you're currently doing, right? Have you been noticing any specific pattern in people, like any specific age group where you're seeing more people coming in, approaching psychologists and, consulting?
So I would say that there are perhaps a few areas or a few groups which probably approach us a lot more now. I would say that obviously the age group that we're looking at is more the younger one. And by the younger one, I don't mean school or college alone. I mean the young adults also. And I think that shift is essentially because people have become more receptive to treatment, and they recognize that mental health is a concern that they would like to address and work on. And I think one of the good changes also is that people are not just coming for problems. A lot of people also come for their own self-growth and development. And they say that, I've seen these patterns, I'm doing fine. It's not that I have a mental health issue per se, but I know that there are certain things within how I think or what my personality is, which is not allowing me to, take it a notch up. So I need help with that. So I think that also is a shift that we have started seeing. we end up working a lot within the relationship space. Currently, I think relationships have become one, a lot more prominent, and secondly, also a lot more challenging, perhaps because of the kind of lives and lifestyles that we do have. Um, Most of us are taxed for time. We have multiple things going on, and we have multiple people around us, and it's so easy in a way to connect to different
Correct.
people. I think this creates a lot of pressure on relationships.
Yeah.
Um, and I think recently, if you've perhaps noticed, separation rates have gone up, breakup rates have gone up. These are reports which have come up in papers. Your court statistics show that as well. And I think those are some of the issues that do certainly come up to us a lot more now, where people are trying to seek, how is it that I solidify my relationship? How do I ensure that it is something that kind of lasts for a longer time? And that's an area that we do end up working with the younger population. If you're looking at school and college students, a lot of times they come up with issues around the pressure to perform, to do well. I don't think that has changed. I think that was there even when I was younger and in school.
True. Yeah.
I think that still persists. But also, I think the exposure that they have to social media and all is far more than what we had. And I think a lot of them struggle to balance that out. And that becomes an area of concern, because there is an impact on, say, self-esteem. A lot of them experience a lot of bullying and trolling, which has become very prominent on media and social media. And that's been a concern which a lot of young people come up to us with, and they feel very confused about how to handle it. And I think perhaps a lot of times, unfortunately, there aren't too many platforms where they can turn to. So it's difficult to sometimes even have conversations with the parents or with the teachers as well about some of these issues for them. And so they struggle to find the right mechanisms, and then people like us try to support them in the best way that we can at that time. And so that becomes something which is very, very common as well. And if you're looking at the current times, I think right now, I think anxiety is one of the most common experiences. Anxiety about work, about jobs, about academics, about will I be able to go to college? Will I be able to give my exams?
Yeah.
Would school open? Is this going to be the new normal? Will I be able to meet my friends? Adults are worried about how will we run our households, and is there some major adjustment we need to do? People are worried about their relationships, because a lot of people, are not physically together.
Correct.
So that is becoming a big, big challenge as well. And they're worried about their family members who are kind of living far apart, because you worry about their health, their safety. So right now, these are a lot of the concerns which do come up currently.
Yeah. So is there any correlation between youngsters who are using a lot of social media versus anxiety and depression? Do you see there is any specific evidence or something that actually is, having a toll on their mental health?
But what does social media do? It puts out, and it puts right in your face a lot of information about what is going on in the world, and it depends upon who is looking at which part of the world, and that really can affect a person's mind. So, for instance, if I'm someone who has been struggling with, say, maintaining my weight, and this is one of the most common things that does come up a lot of times, if I'm someone who's struggling with maintaining my weight, and the exposure that I'm getting to are these, really lit, amazing looking women's or men's profiles, where there are workout pictures, or they're wearing these fabulous clothes, and there is a lot of media messaging which is coming to me, it does impact my mind, right? And it impacts my mind because somewhere one feels inspired that one would want that. But then at the same time, one is able to see that I have been struggling to get that as well. So it can easily translate into it becoming about, is there something wrong with me? Do I not have the skills, or do I not have the perseverance or the willpower? Does it mean that I will always be lagging behind others because I can see some of my other friends being able to do this? So am I not good enough? And it can easily start making a young mind question their own self, their worthiness, their self-esteem. besides the body image related issues which can develop in that context. So that's just one thing, which can come up. And similarly, a lot of times what happens on social media is that there is a level of anonymity in a way, right? You're not coming face to face in front of another. So it's very easy for people to make comments, disparaging remarks, and to be aggressive on social media. And I think that really impacts a lot of people. And people get torn between, now should I take this person to task, and should I now push them and make sure that they can't be this aggressive with me, or should I take care of myself, and is it okay for me to withdraw? And oftentimes that creates a lot of turmoil, and it can be very difficult from a psychological perspective, because if you withdraw, you feel that you're doing injustice to your own self and you're not standing up for your own rights, and you feel like you're losing your respect in your own eyes. But if you start responding to the person who is being aggressive with you, trolling you, or being a bully towards you on social media, you get stuck in this trap where so many people are involved, and it just kind of blows up a lot of times, and it can be so difficult to manage. So it has its own goods and bads, I feel. It's a powerhouse of information and knowledge. It's a powerhouse of getting the right kind of stimulus also. There is no doubt about that. And I think young people have to learn how to figure out what sources they utilize to seek that information from. Media literacy is a very good and very, very significant skill which needs to be talked about, and people need to be informed about it, and they need to become comfortable with saying no to more information. It's okay for me to not look at certain accounts, or not look at my social media handles for, say, a few hours in the day, and take that digital break and detox myself, which would be very critical to their own well-being and their own health, because life is beyond what's there on virtual platforms. It still exists even in reality, which we often can end up ignoring otherwise.
Guys, this brings us to the end of the part 1 of this interview. Stay tuned, the part 2 will be uploaded this Thursday, where we will dive more deeper into the conversation and discover what it takes to be truly successful. Until then, take care of yourself, your family, and the people around you. Peace.